Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Friday, October 25th, 2019, and tonight's topic is Fed and ECB endorse more stimulus. Yesterday, the New York Federal Reserve announced that it will be participating in the repo market, now upping it from $75 billion to $120 billion. Over at the ECB, Mario Draghi says that the European Union fiscal policies and monetary policy should remain accommodative as he passes the baton over to Christine Lagarde. Also, big day in crypto today. We're going to cover the price action there and criminal investigation into the Russia probe. Grand juries impaneled and so on. We're going to discuss what's happening over in that arena and how that might affect the gold, silver prices, the crypto prices, and of course, the general market. But let's get into this repo story with the Federal Reserve. Now, we've discussed this, and I view what the Fed is doing is protecting the financial system, not the economy. This is all about the financial system. Now, the financial system has a huge impact on the economy, and that's not a good thing, but that's the way things are. If you think about the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, was all based on the financial system over leveraging itself and then having to be bailed out by the Fed. Right now what we have is a massive debt binge in dollars has gone on globally for the past 10 years since the financial crisis. Remember, the way they ended the financial crisis, or ended it, or at least alleviated people's concerns about it, was simply to lower interest rates, buy assets, and do QE. And it wasn't just the United States that engaged in this. ECB did it, Bank of Japan did it, China did it more than anyone else. And now we have massive amounts of debt, massive amounts of dollar-denominated debt, massive amounts of dollar obligations. And so the banks are not equipped to handle all of this debt and all of this need for dollars on a short-term basis. Also, the Fed is trying to manipulate interest rates. Now, when I say the banks don't have the dollars to handle the needs of the demand for dollars, they have them, but they're not willing to lend them out at the 2% rate that the Fed is trying to target. Remember, all of this intervention begets more intervention. These are not natural rates of interest. The Federal Reserve, the ECB, the Bank of Japan, Bank of England, all the banks have these interest rates that are designed to, they think, stimulate the economy, and therefore they have these target rates or try to stimulate inflation, and they can't do it alone. And if it's just setting the rate, well, if that doesn't do it, then they've got to jump in. If the market doesn't adopt that rate, they have to flood the system with liquidity. So, yesterday, the New York Fed announced that it would be increasing the repo amount from 75 billion to 100 billion. Here is the text of the New York Fed tweet. Now, I just looked today. For Friday, they only did 71 billion, even though they've got an update to 120 billion. But here's the New York Fed's announcement from yesterday, and I called it more work on the dam. We've updated the schedule of repos for current monthly period. We've increased the amount offered in overnight repos to at least $120 billion starting Thursday, October 24th. And the amount offered for term repos, that's the 14-day repo scheduled for Thursday, October 24th and Tuesday, October 29th, will increase to at least $45 billion. Now, to me, this is not cause for concern. It's actually be cause for concern if they didn't do this. They've set up this system. They've created this system where the system is reliant upon dollars and The Fed has to produce the dollars, has to produce the rate of interest. I don't advocate this, but I pointed out to a dam. Once you have the dam, the dam has to be supported. And that's what's happening right now. It's not necessarily cause for alarm of the economy. It's cause for the alarm that you have a system that is based on central banks having to prop it up all the time. They propped it up in 2007 and 2008, and they've been propping it up ever since. Now, they tried to remove some of the liquidity and remove some of the stimulus, but didn't really work. The Fed did get up to 2.25% interest rates, let some of its balance sheet roll off, while the rest of the world was still driving their rates down to zero and below and doing QE and buying corporate bonds, and Bank of Japan buying ETFs, massive amounts. China printing up massive amounts of dollars. It's very funny. I still think there's some gold bugs out there that believe the China story, that China is some type of paragon of fiscal prudence because they buy gold. Now, they print more money than anyone else, more yuan, and they borrow more dollars probably than anyone else. And this whole idea, China to crush the dollar and gold back yuan, that is 180 degrees away from what's actually happening. It's a complete opposite. The dollar is stronger, and you say, well, that's counterintuitive. All the U.S. does is print dollars. Well, that's half the story. All the world does is print dollars, literally euro dollars. They're dependent upon dollars. The difference is the United States or the Fed is in charge of the whole game. Everyone else, every other country is a vassal. You can talk about Iran and Venezuela and Russia, but these are basically failed economies other than Russia, which is not a failed economy, but because of its isolation and because of its dependency on oil and food exports, I think it's the 11th strongest economy, but it doesn't have the global reach of the United States, or clearly not some of the European nations like Germany, France, Italy, England, and doesn't even have obviously the reach of China. All of those states or nation states that I mentioned are heavily reliant on U.S. trade and the dollar. Now, Russia is not reliant on U.S. trade, but it doesn't have its own infrastructure of trading partners. Yeah, okay, so Iran and Russia have deals and everyone gets all excited. Oh, they might be trading gold. It's irrelevant. In the terms of total financial system, the financial system runs on dollars. This BRICS nonsense includes South Africa. They're not a player. Brazil is not aligned with China in any way. India certainly is not. India and the United States have close ties. So this idea that the world is uniting against the dollar hegemony, and it's complete nonsense. But in any event, all this what is happening, you might say, well, the United States has to do all this, the Fed has to do all this. China's doing the same thing. All countries are throwing liquidity into their markets. It's a global debt Ponzi scheme, if you will. Now, the United States is not even the biggest purveyor of this. China is. Again, this is not good for the global financial system, but this is the financial system that they've created. This is the financial system that exists. And, as I mentioned in my the damn Fed analogy, they have to continually make repairs to the dam. They have to divert water. They've created a massive dam system. It's not just one dam, it's a series of dams, and they all have to be maintained. Anytime they're working on the dam, you may say there's cause for alarm, but if they're not working on the dam, there's cause for alarm. So that's what's happened. The Fed has increased its facility to 120. Now this relieves some of the pressure. This relieves some of the shortage of dollars. And now they can issue up to 120 billion. Now remember, for the 100, this is not really new money if you think about it this way. If banks already own agency debt, mortgage-backed securities, and agency mortgage-backed securities, all the highest rated paper guaranteed by the U.S. government, these aren't mortgage-backed securities issued, bundled up by banks. These are agency mortgage-backed securities backed by the United States government. They already own this collateral. which means it's already been issued. So all they're doing is presenting it to the Fed overnight or on a 14-day term and asking in return to have dollars, cash. So these are not newly issued mortgage. Well, they could be. They could be purchased them in the most recent auctions in the treasuries. But it's not the Fed actually going out and buying these assets. They're just lending against them. However, the Fed recently did announce a $60 billion bond buying program. So that actually is new. They're newly purchased bonds. And again, they're on the short-term level, and they're doing that to keep interest rates low. So one is to keep the system going. That's the repo and the term repurchase agreements, the overnight and the 14-day ones. And the other actually is more market manipulation, buying $60 billion worth of short-term bonds to try to get their target rate of interest where they want it to be. Now, in a free market, you wouldn't have banks trying to target interest rates, target inflation rates, pumping money into the system. But this is the dumb that they've created, and this is what they have to do. It does not indicate the strength or health of the economy, or perhaps even the health or strength of the banks. Remember, we discussed this a few nights already, these banks that are able to access the repo facility and the repurchase agreements, term loans, are 28, 29 banks that the Fed works with. 14 of them are overseas banks. And they are listed by the New York Federal Reserve or the Federal Reserve, I forget which one puts it on their website, as they are banks that are partners with the Fed in conducting monetary policy. So while even though these are private banks, and so is the Fed acts with a more governmental purpose, supposedly, they are actually instruments of the Fed. They're required to buy and to participate in auctions of bonds, and the Fed is making this participation in the repo and the repurchase agreement, 14-day agreements, the overnight and the 14-day, available to them as an accommodation because they're partners. So this truly is an incestuous relationship, and it does include 14 foreign banks that are actually, you could say, helping or complicit in helping the Fed conduct monetary policy. Over at the EU now, Mario Draghi, the Governing Council reiterated the need for highly accommodated stance of monetary policy for a prolonged period of time to support underlying inflation pressures and headline inflation developments over medium term. Usually just mumbo jumbo. All he's saying is we need to print the money, we need to print the money, we need to print the money. And if we printed the money, maybe things will come out okay, maybe they won't, but we need to print the money. But there is an issue here. He says this fiscal policy needs to do more because we cannot just rely on the monetary policy, what the ECB does. If we want the helicopter money, then we're going to have to rely on the fiscal policy. And that's not a product of the central bank to hand out the money. It's something that the states, the fiscal policy, will have to take care of. So you see, now you've got the Fed pumping in $120 billion worth of liquidity on the dumb. You've got Mario Draghi saying we need, as Janet Yellen used to say, highly accommodative monetary policy. In the committee, remember all that nonsense? Well, they've been talking this highly accommodative stuff for 10 years, except the Fed took a break for a couple of years and talked about tapering and talked about rolling off its balance sheet and normalizing interest rates. Well, I haven't done that, really. All they've done is they've raised interest rates about 8 or 9 times. Something I did predict they would do and would try to do. I said they wouldn't get to normalization. I said they'd get to about 2.25, 2.50. It's dead on that. I said that back in 2014, 15, and 16, that they would indeed raise rates, but they wouldn't get them to their normalized level. And now Mario Draghi is preparing to hand over his presidency of the European Central Bank to convicted. I don't know if she's a felon, but she was convicted of a crime, Christine Lagarde, and she's in favor of all this stuff too. So expect more of this highly accommodative innovation from the European Central Bank. And that's where we are with our friends at the central banks. More money printing, printed the money, lower the interest rates. Maybe we do the helicopter money. Fed will continue to pump liquidity in there. They'll manage to keep the system afloat because they're being proactive. If you think this signals, some people do, they could be right. They think that this signals some type of precursor to a collapse. I think it's actually buttressing the dam so that it doesn't collapse. This is what they're doing. I'm not alarmed by it. I'm alarmed in general. It's like if you live downstream from the dam, you should always be concerned. I'd be concerned if they weren't working on the dam, but I'd be concerned if they were working on the dam. I'd say, why are they working on the dam? I don't know. And again, we don't exactly know why they're doing everything that they're doing, and you'll never know. But they generally, I think, because they're trying to protect the whole system, because that's how they all make their mint, don't want to destroy the system, so they're probably trying to protect it, and the way they can protect it is by printing the money. And I think that's what's going on. Now let's move over to crypto. It's a big day in cryptocurrencies today. Not quite sure of the impetus for this. China came out and said that they were encouraging, or Xi Jinping, whatever his name is, the guy who runs the country for life, he said that China should embrace blockchain technology, and that's what they need to do. I don't know if that did it, or maybe BACT had record volume the day before and even doubled that today. Not quite sure why, but the Bitcoin does this from time to time. Why did it go down 10-15%? This goes up and down. It's like a yo-yo. But here's Bitcoin today. I think it was up 15-16%. I think it's still going on. Let me just check here. But put this in perspective. So it starts the day off at about 7,500 and then rockets up to about 8,700. Yeah, it's at 86.58 right now. It's up 16%. Litecoin, same thing, up about 16%. Litecoin, here's your picture here. And they have their Litecoin summit coming up at the end of the week. Yeah, Litecoin is up 15%, like $57. It started the day under 50, went up seven some odd dollars. Well, let's put this back into perspective and let's look at the Bitcoin chart for 3 months, and you can see, back over the summer it was at $1,400. This is a 6 month chart, and you can see to the far right it went down to 7,500, and then boom, it just burst off of that $7,500 mark up to 8,700. So it's now at a level that it hasn't seen since September. So it erased all of the losses incurred from September through October, and now is at the levels when it was dropping in September from around $10,000. So Bitcoin had been hovering between 9,500 and 10,000 for a good portion of the summer, and even as high as 12,000. Then you could see it dropped off, and it just bursted higher here. We'll see if these gains hold, but again, very interesting. This is what happens to Bitcoin, Litecoin, and so on. Let's take a look at what's going on with BACT. Now, BACT has been pretty much a dud since it launched. When it launched a few months ago, ever since then, the price of Bitcoin has fallen. We had days, we had 35, 40 contracts traded. Each contract is worth $8,000. Not much trading. About a week ago, they did about 250 contracts, or 80 contracts. That was a record. Yesterday, they did 580 contracts. Today, the last I checked, they had done 1,100, almost 1,200 contracts. You're getting not even into big money, but that's about $10 million, which is more than they were trading under $1 million worth of contracts. But it seems that I think this is something that's going to take time for institutions to get into the trading. But now BACT is offering, I don't think this drove the price higher, option contracts based on the benchmark BACT monthly Bitcoin futures contract. I guess that adds another layer of gambling to the whole thing, bring more people into the Bitcoin trading system. Remember, one thing about traders is they could trade anything. They trade charts, basically. They're not as interested in the underlying asset as you might think they are. Stories out of the London Bullion Market Association and COMEX traders never seen the actual physical commodities that they trade, whether they're soybeans or pork bellies or gold bars or silver bars. So the fact that New York Stock Exchange and the CME Group run Bitcoin futures exchanges just means that there will be interest in these, because traders love to be on regulated large exchanges, and that's the plan for Backed. And here's another story on Backed. I think it's the same thing. So they're going to launch that Bitcoin futures, the options on futures, the derivative on their physically delivered Bitcoin futures contract on December 9th. This also means that this, as I mentioned, CME Group and New York Stock Exchange doing this, that Bitcoin's probably not going anywhere. It's going to be integrated into the financial system just like any other product. Also, Peter Thiel, from former PayPal executive, I guess he was a co-founder, he's now invested in Bitcoin mining. This wouldn't be happening if this was all going away. I'm not predicting game over or that Bitcoin's going to replace the dollar or Bitcoin's going to whatever. I do think, though, it is going to be a traded asset, and it may appreciate in value simply because it's a new asset on the block, no different than an IPO. IPO comes out, as long as it has Wall Street backing, doesn't matter. Look at it, WeWork or whatever it was. That thing shouldn't have ever even come out. It didn't come out, but it got bought out by SoftBank. So I think there's a thing, I guess you'd have to look at it as endorsed assets. We saw it during the .com, Mary Meeker or that other guy who runs Business Week now. As long as they said that, yeah, we're going to do coverage on this internet stock that makes no money, the stock price went up. You still have companies out there, like Tesla is clearly a company that's not allowed to go down. It's endorsed, it goes up. And then they had that other company that he ran, First Solar. They managed to merge those two together. I just think this is a protected asset. There may be people in governments that don't like it, but I just don't think they're going to. I think it's, first of all, it's hard to ban. And second of all, it's even harder to ban when Fidelity and TD Ameritrade and Wall Street, well, not Wall Street, but New York Stock Exchange and the CME Group are making money off of this stuff, and Peter Thiel's invested in it. I mean, you like or hate Bitcoin, it really doesn't matter what you think or what you like or don't like. Unless if you don't like or don't like Tesla, doesn't mean that it's going to go away. Now, the difference between Tesla and Bitcoin is Tesla theoretically is subject to certain economic rules or principles. Revenue, profits, although they don't seem to matter much, they still drive the price of these companies. Zillow goes up, doesn't matter whether it loses money every year. But Bitcoin, you really don't even have a way of measuring. In fact, they can say, well, the way we're going to measure this is based on its relative scarcity and this stock flow stuff. And they'll say, well, there's only 21 million, 5 million are lost, there's only 3 million left to be mined, notwithstanding mined what, but again, there's a rationale that they can present to make Bitcoin go up. Look, if Wall Street can sell unicorn stocks and stocks that don't make any money and never will make any money and keep them public, keep them running, keep them at high multi-billion-dollar valuation, all because they can make trading fees and profits, I'm sure they can do the same with these cryptocurrencies. And I think that's exactly what they're doing. And then there is a use case. I don't know if anyone knows this or many of our listeners know this, but the Lebanese banks just say, hell, we're closed. They just been closed for a week. Well, one good thing about cryptocurrencies, whether you like them or not, is they don't close. You can trade them and you can exchange value. You can keep the lights on if you can get people to accept your cryptocurrencies in lieu of whatever the Lebanese trade, maybe dollars. But that's an important point. Now, today, let's take a look what happened in the gold and silver markets. It was very interesting. I would say encouraging price action. Here is the price of gold. Now, gold and silver both had a nice early morning spike. Gold went all the way up to 15.17, and then it looks like it took a smackdown, but it still managed to edge a little higher. It was up $1. It's not a big deal, but it was up. It was up significantly. It was up to 15.18. Important to note here, though, is that it did stay above $1,500. Never got below $1,500 during the day. And that, I believe, is what propelled silver higher. And this isn't my first time observation on this. At the beginning of the year, all year I've been saying gold would have to break 1375, then 14, then go to 15, and then do something so that it would eventually stabilize at 15 and get to 16. If that happened, then my prediction was all year, even in December 2018, then silver could crack $20, $21, $22. Got as high as $19.50 so far this year. But let's take a look at the silver price today. And very encouraging because silver participated in the run-up like gold. Saw it go ahead. See, it's more tentative, its rise. It didn't go up like gold did right away. But it kept going higher when it saw gold above that 1,500. And it got as high as 1,830. Now, it did fall when gold fell. But when it saw that, you could see now it got down to 1785. But when gold held the $1,500 mark, look what happened. Silver went up and held its $18 mark. I think it's very critical here. If gold continues to edge higher, let's see where it is in the aftermarket right now. You may see silver continue to move higher. So gold right now is at 50 cents. It's at 1504. And silver's holding at $18. Oh, we're not going to, no, that's the day's tally. We won't see anything now. It is Friday evening. We won't see anything till Sunday night. We'll check back on the prices on Sunday evening. What's going on there? Before we move into the Comey, Brennan, and all the Russia stuff, just a little Moronica here. So our friend Greta Thunberg, she said, I reached the Pacific Ocean. How dare I? And she was all pleased, and she got like 170,000 likes and retweets. And there's a picture, I'm not even going to show it, her standing somewhere, maybe she's in San Diego, all pleased with herself that she had flown to all the way to the Pacific, I guess. And I just thought, well, anyway, here she is taking off on our carbon-free emissions vehicle. And it looks like you can fly that thing and get all the way across oceans just on wind power and a nice sail. Well, let's go over and see what's going on with this criminal investigation stuff. Very interesting. New York Times reporting last night. I haven't seen, there hasn't been an official announcement, but it seems to be the case that the U.S. Department of Justice is opening a criminal investigation into the handling of the Russian probe, and that would mean, now who knows how far this goes, but it was during the Obama administration. You had Comey, Clapper, Page, Strzok, McCabe, Brennan, and there's the CIA director, the NSA director, the FBI director, people who worked at the FBI. Seemingly involved in what might appear to be setups of Papadopoulos, of Flynn, of misuse of the FISA warrant procedures in order to obtain surveillance on Trump campaign workers. So we'll have to see where all this works out. Of course, you're going to have the immediate response that this is simply just Barr and the other guy for payback for everything else that's happened to Trump. And the reverse side to that is this whole thing has been about trying to get Trump since day one and using illegal means to do so. Unfortunately, I think the way this is all going to play out is, and it really does undermine the system. The first undermining of the system is, if indeed the existing FBI and the existing CIA did all these things, well, then everyone has the right to not believe as strongly in our institutions. If it turns out that the other side has believed this to be the case and that these people are fine and upstanding citizens and this is just political payback, well, and if they get thrown in jail or as indictments, there's going to be an undermining of the system that this was nothing more than political payback. Either way, the American system doesn't win here. Perhaps it wins if, indeed, it can show convincingly that there was corruption in the system and they managed to root it out. But I'm not sure a lot of people are going to accept that. I think you do have this divide where people think that Trump is a Russian agent and you're not going to dissuade them of that. And they're just going to think that Barr is a toady for Trump. And no matter what they come out with and show, And the media is going to also take that point of view. The way the New York Times reported it was that the issue is that this is political payback. But there's a lot of documentary evidence, but people aren't going to get into the documentary evidence about what happened. They're just going to believe one narrative or another. It's just like in gold or silver or anything that we ever discuss. Most people are satisfied with a narrative and passing knowledge, and if they can cling on to a few talking points themselves, then they feel confident in having an opinion. In fact, not just an opinion, one that they'll repeat, one that they'll become attached to. It's very difficult to get people to focus. And even when you do, once they've invested time, and we see this all the time, once you get invested in a narrative and you're presented with facts that are contra to that narrative, it's very hard to convince people that they've been wrong for 3 years, 2 years, 1 year. Once they've adopted it, they don't want to believe it. Just like when I bring up certain things, until it becomes so apparent, like this whole China to crush the dollar and gold back yuan. Most people don't believe that anymore, but it took a long time for them to realize. I mean, they thought China was their gold buddy until they saw a lot of things going on in China and realizing that China itself is not the government. Its entire goal, reason for being, is not to buy gold. That's how the gold pumpers made it sound, that China had this grand plan and it was all based on buying gold and crushing the dollar and then backing the yuan with gold, which is complete nonsense. This is not what they're doing. China's never said they were doing. That's the funniest thing about it, or not the funniest thing. The most tragic thing is it's a misrepresentation of what China's been doing. China's never said they're going to buy gold and then they're going to crush the dollar. And then you get all this, well, Sun Tzu says they shouldn't tell you if they are doing it. So you could just project whatever you want onto China. Anyway, here we go with the Flynn case. Now, apparently it looks like that Lisa Page, the Struck Page duo, edited the Flynn 302 in order to take down Flynn. And Comey's mentioned as such, that they decided basically to entrap the guy. They already knew the phone calls that he had. And they said, yeah, I just sent a couple of my guys over to talk to Flynn. You don't need a lawyer. And next thing you know, they're telling him you have lied to the FBI. And that's like the biggest crime you can possibly commit. And essentially Trump had to get rid of him. And of course, Flynn was a guy that was against a lot of the things that were going on. And Obama didn't like him. So they managed to keep him out of the administration, make his life miserable. You know, they SWAT raided Roger Stone. What's interesting is, for what these people did, it's minimal. And what these other people presume to have done, I'm surprised they haven't SWAT raided their homes, Comey's and Lisa Page's and Strzok, looking for their emails and so on. I would not condone that, but it's interesting how many people condoned the SWAT raid on. I mean, Roger Stone's just a guy. I mean, I don't know what he did to warrant 18 people barging into his house at 5 a.m, frogmen in the back. I mean, that's a bit overkill. I mean, he's not dangerous, and he couldn't really have, I don't know. So we'll see. I would hope the DOJ looks into that, because that's the type of stuff that clearly, to me, was political, and to have CNN videotaping the whole thing. I don't know. I think that's designed to make it look like the Trump administration is hanging around some bad hombres if they listen to Roger Stone. I still don't know what he's been charged with. And I don't even know the facts around it. I just think that these types of raids are counter to trust in the system, because it clearly looked to me political. I mean, if he was holding hostages or accused of human trafficking rings, you could say, well, okay, get him while he's sleeping, because he's going to be hard to catch. But I don't know. Anyway, I think that's about it for tonight. Let's see what you guys are saying in the comment section. Tomorrow night, we'll try to combine gold and silver nights. I got a lot of gold stories and not so many silver stories, but we'll get to all the stories tomorrow night and Sunday night. All right. So if you've enjoyed this or any of the other Smaulgld presentations, please consider becoming a Smaulgld patron. Got none in October, and no Smaulgld Subscribe Star new members either. Somewhat disappointing, given that we continue with the good content here. If you're interested in helping Smaulgld out, you can by sending items of physical value or check or cash to Smaulgld LLC, P.O. Box 714, Dover, New Hampshire 03820. Visiting the Smaulgld store and buying your Smaulgld game-changing mugs and other Smaulgld merchandise. Or if you're just going to buy gold or silver, not investment advice to do it, but please consider using the Smaulgld affiliate links to purchase from SD Bullion, Money Metals Exchange, or Golden Eagle Coins. If you use those links, you'll go straight to the site. You'll pay no more, no less than you visit those sites directly. If they've got specials, you get advantage of those too. I just get a small commission when you do buy that way. So please consider doing that for your next purchase. Also, there's coffee on the site. There's storable food. There's a few other offers. So you visit the Smaulgld site or just look below this BitChute or YouTube for those links. And of course, you can always donate directly via Bitcoin or Litecoin by holding your phone up to the QR codes or typing in or cutting and pasting the addresses that I have listed on the screen. So thank you very much. And let's see what you all are saying in the comments. Live chat. We got, where's Barry here? See, Barry says Germany buys gold. Now, I did see that story. I've been following that German story. In fact, I noted a couple of years ago and had an article published in Zero Hedge that Germany actually has been selling gold for the last 15 years. They sell about 3 or 4 tons a year to the government. So the government can mint government-issued gold coins. So Germany's gold hoard goes down a few tons, and I thought that's strange. I thought it was strange that they were selling the gold and never replacing it. But when I saw that they bought gold, I didn't understand. I saw no announcement, and then apparently someone had seen it on the IMF site, and now there's evidence that they removed that from the IMF site. Here's the other thing. Who knows what any of these countries are really doing? People insist they know what the U.S. is doing. They insist they know what China is doing. No one knows what anyone's doing. But anyway, if you follow the official numbers, officially it looked like they did buy gold. Now officially it looks like they didn't buy gold. We do know, or we think we know, that they repatriated some gold from the United States, England, Bank of England, and Bank of France. But again, no one really knows what's going on with these countries and what they say they have. Albert S. is here. Following a live stream. Max Strong is here. Jeff Koenig, how much money is the amount the Pentagon's budget for a year is $60 billion? Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Not so much. I was never exercised. I'm still not over the repo, because the repo really isn't printing money. It's making available cash for pre-existing collateral. It's when they print the $60 billion though and just buy more bonds, and that's a lot of money. That's big cash. And the fact that the Fed can do this is unbelievable. Remember the other night we were talking about Mervyn King, former Bank of England governor who led the country out of the financial crisis. He was saying that, if the Fed lacks the firepower to stop the dam, pretty much using my analogy, then we could have financial Armageddon. Well, I agree with that, but that's always been the case. The financial system is set up to collapse unless there's this intervention. The fact that they're intervening, to me, is not a warning sign. The warning sign is that it already exists, that this financial system is unsustainable, so to speak, and it only is sustained through printing the money, printing the money, printing the money. Albert says the Fed is lying. They want more than 2% inflation. No, they do. They're willing to live with more. Their official goal is 2%. They'd like to get more than 2%. They claim they're having a problem because the numbers say they're not getting their 2%. Fiona is here. Internet Tough Guy is here. GBTC up 21% today. What is GBTC? Is that the that fund? What the hell is it called? By the guy Siebert. Anyway, I think that's the Bitcoin. It's not an ETF. It's some kind of fund that you can buy on your stock account. Can't think of the name of the company that sells that stuff. But anyway, the guy's name is Siebert. Jack Howard is going to miss Mario. We'll bring him back. Did Platinum and Palladium go up today? I don't even know, Albert. Let's take a look here. Yeah, Platinum was up $3. Palladium was down. Platinum's over 924. All right. Fiona Whalen, Smaulgld. Majority of New Yorkers are exact only that, they're still convinced Trump was elected by Russia. There's nothing you can do to bring them over. It's kind of ridiculous because if you can convince people of that based on little evidence, and if you actually research it, I don't mean listen to YouTubes, but you look at the different documents that are available, it does look like they created a Russian narrative. That this, if you know the Papadopoulos story, if you know the Flynn story, if you know what they did with the FISA warrants and how they create evidence and then submit it to the media, and then the media reports it, and then if they go and tell Trump about it, that somehow that means it's true, and now the media can report on it, and then they can put it in a FISA warrant. That's just logically, that makes no sense. I mean, you could say, no, they made that up. Clear that they made that up. But once they've convinced you, see, the thing is, all you have to do, and we see this in our gold and silver, if you're against Trump, you'll believe anything. You could say, oh, he went out and he did this and he did that, and somebody said this and it was in the paper, and you say, of course he did that. I don't like the guy. I think he did even more than that. And it's the same thing when you hear some gold pumper story or silver pumper story or whatever the Fed's doing. You want to believe the worst, and you'll believe anything. You want to believe that the Fed's the worst, so you'll say, yeah, the Fed's taking bad collateral because why not? We don't like the Fed, and the Fed might as well be doing that. They haven't audited, so that's what we believe. In other words, it's the old you can't prove they're not doing it mentality, which is the most contra to legal analysis that you can do. JP Morgan is buying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Silver Eagles. And you say, well, no, they're not. There's no evidence that they've done that. And they say, well, you can't prove that they're not doing that. Oh, okay, that must mean they're doing it because somebody wants to say something. And if you want to believe that story and you don't like JP Morgan and you think you're manipulating the silver market and you want to believe that JP Morgan's got a hoard of Silver Eagles and one day they're going to let the silver price fly, well, then you'll believe it. And you can't be convinced otherwise. That's just the nature of YouTube and human nature. All right, let's see. All right, I think that's about it for tonight. So I do want to thank everyone for joining me tonight, and we will see you soon, I hope. Have a good night.